Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 8 of Party in the Back, the review series for the wagons and estate cars of GranTurismo 6. And in this particular episode we're featuring another model of Subaru's wagon lineup, the Legacy in particular. And this model is the oldest Legacy wagon which you can get in the game. It's a 1996 spec vehicle, and it's the Legacy GT-B. Of all the Legacies that are on the game, I'd say this is probably my preferred version. I wouldn't classify it as one of my favourite estate cars, but of the Legacies, I do like this one a little bit more than some of the newer ones. And the main reason for that is because, quite simply, it's more understated. Now, the Legacies aren't exactly showy cars anyway, they're kind of like Saabs, they just do the job without really being that outlandish. This model, though, is much more of a sleeper, even when compared to those relatively normal newer models, mainly because of its 90s styling. Because there are some cars that come from the 90s which are kind of timeless, like the RX-7, the Supra, etc. But there are other vehicles which really do start to look their age, and this is one of those cars. You can tell immediately that this is a 90s design. Now that said, being a Subaru, it's not too surprisingly all-wheel drive and has a pretty decent performance spec. Subaru knows how to make high-performance all-wheel drive cars, and this is no exception to that. Now, it doesn't have the strongest overall spec of the Legacy lineup. We'll get to that model in a future episode, but it is a strong all-round car. I would classify this as more of a mid-level performance car. It's never going to take on a supercar or a racing car around the track, but at the same time it's good enough to beat some saloons, some hot hatches and some of the other wagons. As I said, a mid-level performance vehicle, good for anything between the 475 to say 525 pp level. Now its spec is a 2-litre turbo engine, 524 horsepower, 395 pound-feet of torque, and a pretty decent weight of 1176 kilos. It puts out a perfectly respectable 446 horsepower per tonne, which is around what you'd expect from a hot hatch, which is pretty decent for a car of its size. And it sits at a maximum PP of perhaps a slightly too high, but not too unworkable, 542. The price is, not surprisingly, pretty good. Most Japanese cars on GranTurismo are pretty good value for money, and this is no exception. It costs less than 30,000 credits, so for the money, the power and spec sheet is very good. It's an all-wheel drive car, which means you can launch off the line rapidly. It does 0 to 60 in around 2 seconds or less with NOS and a drag setup applied to it. I've actually done a drag tune for this car in the past, and it can launch off the line in far quicker times than it looks, which, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the reasons that I like it. It's a great sleeper car. However, unlike some of my absolute favourite sleeper cars, this car does have limits. Now obviously they all have limits, but the limits of this car do come into play a bit earlier than I would have liked. And what I mean by that is specifically its overall performance, especially in a straight line. It launches off the line very quickly. It can get up to 100 or 150 very quickly, but at anything above that, it really starts to peter off. And that's the case with most of the Japanese wagons. Even ones with far more power, like the Nissan Stager, do fall off top end, and this car's no exception to that, unfortunately. Top end, it will never worry something like an Audi RS4 or an RS6. Off the line, perfectly capable. Mid-range, not so much. Top end, forget it. It's just not this car's strong point. What about around the track, though? Well, it's a Subaru and it's all-wheel drive, so what do you expect? There's tons of grip. Despite the fact that it is a wagon, it's not a particularly big car. It's big, it's a wagon, but it's not huge. It's not even as big as more modestly sized American cars. So for overall compactness and weight, it's pretty good. It's highly manoeuvrable, very forgiving, as Subarus do tend to be around the track, and the car makes you feel very safe when you drive it. It's And I don't mean about airbags and seatbelts. That's not the kind of safety I'm referring to. I'm referring to that the car provides you with a kind of handling safety net. You can kind of act like a bit of an imbecile and the car will, most of the time, save you. The handling is good, it's dependable, it's what you'd expect from Subaru Legacy. Nothing special, it just does the job without any fuss. So overall, if you're looking for something to set records, well, it has the potential to at certain PP levels, but overall it's not that kind of car. This is a car for people who want to try something different, something cheap, something affordable, and something which is an interesting alternative to more the mid to lower end of wagons. As I said, it can't take on the Audis, it can't take on something like a Nissan Stager even because of the power advantage of that car, but up against the other Subarus, up against the Lexus wagon, up against the Volvo, etc., it's a perfectly capable car. So, that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.